Happy Friday, awesome students. I hope that you had a great week, and I hope that your weekend is going to be nice and relaxing to you. And I hope, of course, that you stay safe. So this week we finished up Macbeth. You've read all 5 acts. Hopefully you have a good understanding of what was going on there. Hopefully the videos that I posted for you, as well as the discussions that we've had during our opportunity blocks, have been helpful to you. So in this video that we're recording right now, so we're going to talk about Act 5. It's going to be our final part in which we discuss the concept of internal conflict and guilt as found in the play Macbeth. And this is a pretty easy act to tackle because primarily it's going to revolve around one character and one iconic image, and that is Lady Macbeth and her bloody hands, the hands that she keeps washing but cannot get clean. So without any further ado, let's take a look. I'm going to share with you, as always, our text, and then we'll take a look at some of the textual evidence, and hopefully this will help you and give you some more support in terms of writing that essay that we're going to talk about on Monday. So right now I'm sharing with you. So again, we're looking at Act 5 here, right? We're at the very beginning of Act 5, really. We're taking a look at line 22, maybe 23, and this is where that imagery begins. So the doctor sees that Lady Macbeth has come out and she's rubbing her hands. So he says, look how she rubs her hands. And then the gentlewoman, she goes on that says, it is an accustomed action. With her to seem thus washing her hands, I have known her to continue in this a quarter of an hour. So she washes her hand continuously for 15 minutes, which is a lengthy time, of course, too. And some of the versions of the play that I've seen or in movies I've seen, she washes them so much that they become raw. Now, Macbeth does not, Macbeth rather, but Shakespeare doesn't get into those specifics. So Lady Macbeth says, yet here's a spot. The doctor says she speaks, and then Lady Macbeth says, out, damn spot, out, I say. 1, 2, why then? 'Tis time to do it. Hell is murky, fine, my lord, fine. So she's clearly not in her right senses. And by the way, she's kind of sleepwalking at this moment. Her eyes are open, but she's clearly disconnected from reality as she's walking around, rubbing her hands, not literally washing them, but rubbing them together. When she does wash them, like I said, 15 minutes ago, but rubbing together constantly here. So what continues on here? What else is going on here? Well, we know that it's blood that's on her hands. And the reason why is because when we jump over to about line 42, she says, here's the smell of blood still. And she goes on to say that the perfumes can't get the smell of the blood off of her hands. So let's talk about this concept of what's literally happening here. She says she has blood on her hands that she can't wash out. That term, blood on your hands, it's a reference to somebody who's done something wrong. Something usually where you're murdering or taking another person's life. And that's, of course, very applicable for Lady Macbeth here. She was involved in high crimes and treason, the murdering of multiple people, specifically of King Duncan. And she, of course, was very aware of Macbeth's plans to murder Banquo as well as some other individuals here. So this is the blood that's on her hands. And we know it's guilt about the way she feels, because if we take a look here at about line 52, she talks about Banquo being buried, right? And then the doctor gives us more information on line 61. He says that foul whisperings are abroad, meaning, and I'll just read the blurb here, says rumors of evil deeds have been circulating. So people have been talking about how there's some evil deeds have been taking place. And then the doctor goes on to say that when there's unnatural deeds, they breed unnatural troubles, meaning actions have consequences. So in this particular case here, the actions of the murdering of the king, of murdering Banquo, one other individuals, these unnatural or evil deeds, well, there's a consequence. In this particular case, it's going to be an unnatural consequence that's taking place. He goes on one step further to cement the concept that it's an internal, it's a spiritual ailment, if you will, by going to say that she doesn't need a physician. She doesn't need a doctor. That's line 64. Instead, she needs a priest because it's her conscience that's really, really bothering her, of course. So if we continue on here, Macbeth won't have anything of it. He's telling the doctor, you got to cure her, right? And we're looking at here, this is scene 3. He says, you got to cure her. You got to cure her of that. And the doctor, in essence, says, therein the patient must minister to himself. Meaning, there's certain things a doctor can't cure, especially if it deals with what matters of the heart, matters of guilt, matters of the soul. But instead, the patient sort of has to heal him or herself. So not the doctor, but rather Macbeth is not pleased about this at all. And he goes on and he talks about his displeasure for their inability to cure or to heal Lady Macbeth. Well, it doesn't take long because in scene 5, Lady Macbeth kills herself. We find out this about line 17, where it's reported that the queen, my lord, is dead. And Macbeth does not handle this particularly well because it's just one more loss that he suffers. And of course, we know this was going to come because he was a tragic figure. And part of the downfall is the desolation of everything he holds dear within his life. That includes loved ones. That includes how individuals perceive him, right? His honor, for lack of a better word. And that also talks about his power, which includes not just physical power like armies and stuff, but also wealth too. So he goes on to say that she should have died hereafter. That sounds like it's cold, but it's really not. In essence, what he's saying is that I wish she died at a later time. Why? Because there would have been time for such a word, meaning he doesn't have time to mourn her because of what's going on right now, you know, with the war and everything on that nature. Following that, the next 10 lines or so are very famous within Shakespeare. It's one of the more famous speeches that Shakespeare's written. So I think it's worth our while to take a look at it because it also ties into about the idea of how Macbeth sort of views the world. And one of the ways that he's kind of not demonstrating guilt or any sort of real conflict that's taking place here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of blow up the page just a little bit here so you can see it a little bit better. So let's back up here. So here we are. We're looking at this. We're going to start right here on line 19. So again, we're in scene 5, and we're looking at line 19. It says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. That's good stuff here. So what is he saying here? Well, first, one of the things he's talking about is that life is short, right? It drolls on and on and on and on here, right? So that life is brief and so on and so forth. But the key concept you find at the end that I've highlighted for you, it says that it, meaning life, is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing. That last part, in essence, is the key moment where Macbeth basically says that life has no purpose and it has no meaning. So how does that tie to internal conflict or guilt? Well, it depends on if Macbeth meant it this way. It's very possible that this is part of the way that Macbeth sort of is justifying or at least downplaying his actions of regicide among other murders here. If life doesn't matter, right? If his actions don't matter, if his entire existence, as well as all others, is petty and small and insignificant, then him murdering King Duncan and other people also is petty and small and insignificant, thus downplaying any sort of evil that really he's sort of been committing here. So this is clear evidence, if we read it in that way, that Macbeth certainly doesn't feel any guilt in terms of any of the actions that have taken place. Whereas with Lady Macbeth, her guilt was so powerful that she kills herself, right? She commits suicide here. Let's look at the final line that we're looking at with Macbeth and this whole sort of thematic idea. And it's actually Macbeth's final scene and his final lines. He's fighting Macduff right now, right? And if you recall, the prophecies have said a variety of things must take place for Macbeth to finally die. And one of the prophecies says is that he can't be killed by a person, by a man who was born from a woman. And so he thinks he's invincible. And Macduff, of course, announces, well, you know what? I was born from a C-section, so therefore I wasn't born from a woman. And this is sort of the final brick in the wall that seals the doom of Macbeth. So some people would drop to their knees rather, and sort of beg for forgiveness and be apologetic and feel guilty for what they've done as sort of a crashing realization of all of their inaction of taking place. But in this case here, Macbeth is very Faustian nature. And I say Faustian because Faust is the guy in literature who sold his soul to the devil in order to get riches and fame and fortune and so on and so forth, knowledge and the like. And what happened was that 24 years later, the devil came to collect his soul. And so as Faust is being pulled down into the depths of hell by demons, among other things there, his friends are saying, Faust, all you got to do is just say you're sorry. Just ask God for forgiveness and your soul will be saved. And Faust looks at him in the eyes and he says, no. And Macbeth does the same thing here. All he has to do is basically say, I was wrong. It doesn't mean he won't have consequences, but say, I was wrong, and his soul could be saved here, so to speak. But what does he say instead? Well, we're looking at the final scene in Macbeth. We're looking at line 29, 28, 27 onwards, and he says, I will not yield, meaning I'm not going to say sorry. No way. So he decides that this will be his last try. Before my body, I throw my warlike shield, lay on Macduff, and damn be him that first cries, hold, and enough. Any sort of guilt that Macbeth might have felt in the beginning, any sort of conflict that he had for his actions, those initial actions, especially with the killing of King Duncan, they're gone. Remember early on, remember in the first act, he's got this, he talks about these, his thought process of killing King Duncan being a horrid image. He contemplates whether or not he should step over or go through Malcolm. He even tells Lady Macbeth that enough, we're not going to follow through with this. And then 4 acts later, when faced with the reality of all of his evil and his wicked and his ill decisions, there is no more of that Act 1 Macbeth left, who will sit there and say, maybe I'm wrong. No, instead he embraces all that he is when it comes to the evil actions that he's committed. So hopefully this is helpful to you as it relates to guilt and internal conflict. As always, if you need additional support, if you have any questions, send me an email. What is more useful, of course, is if you log in on Monday with me for our opportunity block, and we'll talk about this particular act in more detail, as well as other acts and the assignment itself as it relates to what my expectations are and what the requirements are. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you rest easy. I will see you Monday. Be safe.